right. So, welcome everyone. It's a beautiful day out here in Vancouver. I hope it's equally as nice in Ontario or wherever you are in Canada. We just wanted to start off as we always do, with, welcome and just some gentle reminders about guest etiquette. As I'm talking right now, you can continue to fill out the forms or revisit it later, whatever you prefer. And thank you for those who were in attendance at the annual general meeting. It was a great success. And Marina will talk more on that later as our representative for the student committee there. And also just some reminders about the etiquette for our meetings and for the speaker. Um, you know, Put your appropriate first and last name and initial for attendance. Please remember to keep your sound muted while the presentation is going on and have your video on at least for the speakers just to kind of feel like they're, not talking into a void a little bit if you feel comfortable. And reminder recording will happen. Yes, recording is happening. Okay, great. And now on to our guest speaker. So Diana Verma, is that how I pronounce it?
Varma, but that
Varma.
works too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Diana Varma. I just want to make sure because people always get my name wrong. Um, all right, welcome to Diana Varma. Diana Varma is an RGD and is working as a design educator at Toronto Metropolitan University by day and a podcaster by night, getting creative with creatives about all things creative. She is a curious human who dabbles in a variety of printing technologies, and she currently holds the position of VP Education on the board of directors for the RGD, Canada's largest professional association for graphic designers. Diana lives with her family near Toronto, and she can be found at www.talkpaperscissors.info or on Instagram at talkpaperscissors. All right, welcome, Diana, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and that warm welcome and introduction. Hello, everyone. How are we tonight and this evening? Pretty good. Pretty good. Excellent. Okay. So I thought when Marina asked me if I could do this and come and chat with the group of student RGDs, um, what I might talk about. So I want to talk about one of my very favorite topics, which is failure. Who likes failure? Wah, wah. There we go. Okay. So failure is a tricky one. Failure is a tricky one. And I want this to not be a lecture so much as kind of an interactive workshopy session. And can you remind me how long I have? What time do I have until? Because I could talk for
Due
hours, but no
due
one
to
wants
the
that.
delay, you have until 8:45, 8:50. That's
Fantastic.
in addition to 5 minutes of questions.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So I want to share first and foremost with everyone. I'm going to share in the chat a file with everyone. Let's go here. Let's see, I've never actually shared a file via the chat in Zoom, but there's a first for everything. Let's do it. Okay, did we get the file? Good.
Yes.
Good, good, good. Excellent. So you're welcome to open that up. We don't need it quite yet, but I just wanted to make sure that you could get it. So you can open that up, save it in a spot. We'll use it in about 5 minutes or so. So I had the very great pleasure and honor of working on a Domestika course. Who knows? Does anyone know Domestika? The platform Domestika. It's kind of like a Skillshare or LinkedIn Learning or masterclass. It's kind of like an online learning platform. So I had the really great pleasure of being able to actually create a Domestika video and Domestika series with the Domestika team a couple of years ago about creative confidence. So I really got to dig in and dive in and explore what it means to fail as a creative and a professional and how we can kind of keep our confidence high even in the face of failure. So that workbook that I just sent you via PDF, that is from that course. We're only going to be looking at a small subsection, but the rest is yours if you ever want to dive in and tinker with that and some of the other exercises. Okay, but here's what I want to share about failure. Here we go. So what stops us from being our most creatively confident selves? And I think oftentimes the fear of failure is exactly what's stopping us. So failure to perform, failure to succeed, failure to live up to the expectations that we place on ourselves and that others place on us. But failure is really interesting because it can be big or small. It's relative. It can be big or small. It can drop in for a quick visit, or it can stay for quite a while. And while failure may choose to walk alongside us in our creative lives, and oftentimes it does walk alongside us as creatives, I want to stress that we are not failure. So there's a difference. We are not failure. Failure can walk alongside us, but we are not failure. And it's in establishing this healthy boundary with failure, kind of as a separate external entity from oneself, that I really believe is at the core of becoming more creatively confident. Now, I think it helps to define how you currently experience failure's presence. And we're going to do this in a second. So, for example, what does failure look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell, taste, and feel like? And so, understanding how you experience the sensations of failure can help bring awareness when it pays a visit. And it also helps to reaffirm its separateness from us. And really and truly, I believe this, that a world of opportunities that are brimming with greater self-confidence and self-worth fills the newly found space between ourselves and failure. There we go. But I also want to say that failure can be misunderstood. While it's often seen as the enemy when we first meet failure, making friends with failure can really allow us to grow in unexpected ways. Now, once we've established a healthy boundary with failure, we understand it shows up, we understand that it can seem like the enemy at first, we understand that it is separate from ourselves. We can then, at that stage in the process, welcome it with open arms and ask it to play with us in our creative endeavors when we move it from our identity. And what happens is really cool, because what can happen if we allow it to is that failure can become a co-creator, it can become a confidant, it can become a valued member of the team. And so when we make friends with failure, what we're saying is that we are okay exploring uncharted territory. We're open to whatever is on the other side of creative work that has not been attempted before. So let's dive into this. I think this is probably the logical next step. So if I can have everyone open that PDF, please, because we're going to make friends with failure. So on page 23, so if you scroll down to page 23, there we go. So this is an exercise that I like to call plan to fail. Plan to fail. So what I would like everyone to do, if you don't have something near you that you can write with and write on, take the time to just grab it right now. So just grab a piece of paper, a scrap of paper, whatever you have near you is absolutely fine. I'm going to scooch this over a bit. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone a second to get that paper. And if you can give me maybe a little emoji or something in the chat to let me know that you have paper and a pencil. Or you can, yeah, give me a thumbs up, give me some sort of signifier that you have what you need. Perfect. I like this.
Diana, if you
Yeah,
don't mind, would you kindly resend that link, because the new members that are joining the meeting can't see previous chat messages.
sure
If you
can.
don't mind, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Here it comes again. All right, there we go. Perfect. All right, so again, we're on page, what did I say, 23? Let's open that back up. Yes, page 23, and you've got something to write with and something to write on. Yeah? Good. Okay. So the next step in this process, as you can see, is to write your name on your sheet of paper, and just write it with your dominant hand. Nothing fancy here, just write your name, maybe a couple of times even. So if you're right-handed, this is with your right hand. If you're left-handed, that's with your left hand. So just write your name with your dominant hand. Should be pretty easy. So what I would like everyone to do in the chat is just maybe throw a few words out as to how that felt. So maybe words like familiar or comfortable, or I'm sure there's others, but drop a word in the chat as to how that felt to write with your dominant hand. Normal. Yep. Smooth, easy, flow, easy. Great. All right. Now, the next stage in this process is to switch hands. So your non-dominant hand. Now, this is going to feel a little different unless you are truly ambidextrous, and I have not met anyone who really is. Ooh. Try writing your name a couple of times with your non-dominant hand. Now, if you want to get really fancy, oh boy, I don't know if I want to get fancy. You can also try your name in cursive with your non-dominant hand. Good. So take another minute or so. Keep writing with that wrong hand, so to speak. And then if you can place a word in the chat as to how that felt. Janky's a good word. Awkward. You're having to concentrate. Yeah. It's hard. It's childlike. It's awkward. Oof. Ugly. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Stranger. That's a fun, interesting term. So I often call this like your twin that knows nothing. Your ignorant twin is your other hand. Peculiar, mentally tasking, weird, interesting, hard, rough. Okay, all great words. Now, what you've just experienced is you've experienced a little bit of failure, right? So I think it's important, from my perspective, failure is not a destination, it's absolutely part of the journey. So if you want to think about a metaphor of a race, for example, so in a race, like in, I don't know, Formula One, I don't follow Formula One, but you can imagine that a car would have to go off and stop to refuel or stop to fix a tire or stop to do something in as a pit stop, right? But that pit stop is not the end of the race. There's something that needs to be overcome. There's a problem that needs to be solved. There's failure that you need to work through, but that's not the end of the race. The end of the race is when you cross the finish line. And I think of failure more broadly in a day-to-day context in a very similar way, that it's a pit stop, but it doesn't have to be the final destination if we don't allow it to be. So what that means is being gritty and being able to push through and being able to really work through some of the obstacles that we are experiencing creatively. All right. Now, I'm curious to know your thoughts. So there's two questions on page 24, and we don't have to spend a lot of time here, but I think it's helpful. So first of all, what does failure look like in creative work? But maybe more importantly, the question that I'd like us to address right now is failure necessary in creative work? So take a second to think about that. Let's focus on question number 2. Is failure necessary in creative work? Why or why not? And feel free to put your thought in the chat. Is failure necessary in creative work? What do you think? And even if you don't have a fully fleshed out thought, even if it's just a yes or a no. Okay, we've got some answers coming in. I'll read them aloud. Yes, because no one is immediately an expert at something new they try. I completely agree. Yes, because it helps to see all sides of a perspective and be a better creative. So that requires experimentation, that requires trying new things, that requires experimenting with what's possible. Yes, feeling like you have done not much to improve. usually teaches us something. I couldn't agree more. Yes, often doesn't grow as a creative unless you've tried and failed a few times. Yeah, and I think a really key thing for me is when I fail and I have to figure out and I have to problem solve. I mean, life is just one big problem to solve, one after the other, right? So if you start to like problem solving and see this through a new lens, oftentimes walking through the challenges of life become easier too. You can kind of take it outside of a creative context and expand it, extrapolate. But when I fail at something and I have to figure out how to not fail because I want to do it, I learned so much more than had I done it exactly right the first time. As part of the creative process, do thumbnail sketches. So technically every idea I don't use is a failed idea. Wonderful perspective. Yeah, nobody likes sharing back work. I think it's necessary to help you grow as a designer. Yeah, absolutely. Confidence and self-compassion are two sides of the same coin. Okay, these are all excellent. Oh wow, okay, there's so much richness. Have a look through there. But let's keep going. So I think we're all in agreement uh, from what I've seen in the chat that, yeah, failure to some degree is necessary in creative work. So let's move on to page 25. And this is where I think it gets really interesting. I've done this exercise a lot, both with students and professionals, and it always amazes me both the similarities in answers between individuals as well as the differences in the way that failure takes shape for different people. So I would like you, if we're thinking about failure through a sensory lens, to try and separate ourselves from failure. So, in other words, if failure were real, if it were a being that existed and lived outside of yourself, what would it look like, feel like, sound like, smell like, and taste like? Try and fill in as many of those 5 as you can. You don't have to do them all, but see how many you can come up with. And really take a second. I'm going to stop talking, but take a second and think about, okay, that time you failed, and kind of go back to that moment. What are your gut reactions? How did you sense it in that moment? Okay, so maybe take 2 minutes or so and see how many you can come up with. Okay, so let's start with this one. What does it look like? If you have a word, a thought, an idea, feel free to type it in the chat. Big, awkward, green monster. Mmm, mmm, very vivid. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Feel free. It doesn't have to just be look, but feel, sound, smell, taste, anything you've got. Let's see what we got. A black hole. Yeah. Kind of the void. When you wake up in the morning, the feeling of a chalkboard, nails on a chalkboard. Ooh. Windy winter storm. Mm, mm. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I said that it looked big and shadowy. It felt rough or it feels rough and cold. It's quite quiet. I don't see failure as something that is loud and booming, although I've heard that before from others. But for me, it's kind of quiet and lurks in the background. And you can feel its presence. I also think I've heard a few different things for smell, but to me, it almost is like neutral smell. Like there's no smell. It's just kind of, it's quiet, it's evasive. And then taste, maybe like metallic-y, water bottle-y taste. Like it feels off and it gives you that reaction. Okay, so I love this exercise, clearly, but I think it's helpful. I think it's helpful however you envision failure, however you feel and sense and really picture failure. I think once you have something in your mind that you can disassociate from yourself, it makes it all the more easier to go, oh, this is not me. This is failure that's walking alongside me, that's staying for part of the journey, and failure will leave for part of the journey and maybe come back and visit. And right, it's an entity. We don't have to conflate it with our own identity. It has its own. It can have its own. Okay, so now the last stage of this process is on page 26, and this is where things get wild. Get ready for it. Now, I've done this on stage in front of about 500 people, and I don't know how many people actually did this with me, but I had to commit to the bit, so I'm going to do the same today. If you are comfortable doing so, I would like you to take off a sock. Yeah, things got weird, told you. Now, if you're not comfortable taking off a sock or you're in public or something like that, you can use different jokes on you. You're not wearing any. That's good. You're prepared. You can use any part of your body that is not your fingers or your hand, right, to hold the pencil. So whether it's in the crook of your elbow, whether it's in your mouth, whatever. I'm going to use my toes. There we go. So place the pencil somewhere other than your hands. And on a sheet of paper, I now want you to try writing your name again. So we wrote it with our dominant hand. We wrote our name with our non-dominant hand. And now we're going to try writing it with your foot. Now, unless you have true pedidexterity and you're some sort of genius with your feet, you're probably going to find this ridiculously hard, like laughably hard. And that's the point. That's the point. You're not supposed to be good at this. In fact, it's way better. The result is more interesting if you're not good at this. So I encourage you to fail, but specifically invite failure to play in this process. What does it look like when even, I'm going to go one step further. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to go one step further and I'm going to use my non-dominant foot. See if that's even weaker than my, oh yeah. And my foot's cramping up. Don't know about you. Oh boy, it's all happening. Okay, how do we do? How do we make out? So if you are willing and able, let me remove my spotlight for a second. If you are willing and able to turn on your camera and show us what you created, how you failed, I would love to see it. Mine's hard to see. Like it's not even legible in any way. Oh yeah, these are good. All right. Amazing. Okay. Amazing. So here I'll do this again. There we go. So I think it is failure and embracing failure is an opportunity to try, is an opportunity to try something new, is an opportunity to get curious and experiment and observe and acknowledge, embrace, learn, grow, all the things. This is what happens when we are able to make friends with failure. And when we struggle to make friends with failure, I think that really stunts our growth creatively and otherwise. And it's when we can get comfortable knowing that failure is not us, but it walks alongside us, that's really, I think, where the magic happens, right? When we start to unravel that complex conditioning and unlearn that we're only as good as our outputs, we start to uncouple work and worth. And we give ourselves permission at that point to experience failure, really finding strength and quiet confidence, knowing that we are worthy because we are divine human beings, irrespective of our creative pursuits. And I think that's where the magic lives, in the experimentation, in the journey, in the figuring it all out, as weird as it might be. Now, I wanted to share something with you. I am going to share my screen if possible. Let's see. There we go. So I took it one step further. I was doing this exercise, I have been for a while now, with a number of different groups, and I thought, where could I take this? So what I ended up doing is I used my foot drawings to create a heart-centered, foot-centered experimental font that I co-created with Failure. And so I called it Friends with Failure. Um, there it is. And each letter has an alternate that I drew with my other foot. There's the lowercase, but yes, so there's lots of, this is all done in one take. There are no retakes. This is all just first shot, see what happens. But yeah, I ended up with this really weird, fun, playful font. It is a free font. If you really want to annoy your professors at the final end of semester, please submit your work using this font. It will drive people bonkers. So I'll just put a link to the spot where you can find that if you want to download it. But it's just it's such a fun way. Hopefully you've enjoyed kind of exploring what it means to make friends with failure, and I encourage all of you to do so as often as possible, because I think really that's where the magic happens. So thank you all. Yay! Are there any questions? Anything I can help answer? I'll remove my spotlight again. Any thoughts, comments, ideas, anything at all?
Well, thank you so much, Diana. Yeah, everyone, please, comments, questions, anything. That was extremely fun. So,
Okay, good. Excellent.
Rachel?
Yeah, this is gonna sound weird. How do you keep finding creative ways to fail? Like, how did the foot thing happen, and like, how do you just stay inspired like that, I guess?
Good question. So whenever I have an idea or something that I think is the seed of an idea, I am constantly scribbling things down on random scraps of paper, in notebooks. Sometimes I'm a little more organized and I have a Google Doc I can throw things into. So it's kind of just keeping this repository of my brain's notes. And a lot of that stuff never ever sees the light of day, but some of it does. And so I think that is one of the best pieces of advice I can give to anyone who's just starting out, is to let your ideas marinate, because that's when the most interesting ideas come about, I think, is when you have space and time, from the time that you initially thought of something to the time when it has to be, or goes out into the world. And so writing the ideas down is one thing, and then just like trying some things out, knowing that they are not going to work, knowing that you're going to figure it out as you go. I have made peace with failure. It doesn't mean it's not hard if I am really set on an outcome and it just doesn't happen the way I think it will. But I think being open to experimentation is a big part of that. And then also just knowing that quantity equals quality. That's been a huge thing for me, is just knowing that the more I'm doing something, like the more I'm able to kind of make work, the better it's going to be. The closer I will get to success faster. It's like a shortcut. So quantity really does equal quality.
Thank you.
That was a long-winded answer. For
Yeah.
probably I didn't answer it, but hopefully that gives you some
More, I guess.
What's that?
I said just like more, and then probably writing stuff down.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
All right, Mia, do you
Yeah,
want
Mia.
Technical question actually. How did you turn your fonts into a font file?
Okay, so what I did, I use this really great plugin called Font Self. Has anyone heard of Font Self before? Yeah, some yes, some no. I'll link it here. Whoops, that's not it. Hold on. Font Self FontSelf is this really great plugin. They have a plugin for Illustrator, one for Photoshop, and they also have an iPad app that you can create fonts directly in the app. So maybe a future iteration will just be me and an Apple Pencil right in and building it. But basically, I used a permanent marker on white paper, and then I scanned or took a photo of the alphabet that I drew with my feet. I brought it into Illustrator. I essentially converted it, I vectorized it in Illustrator. And then from there, it's literally just like a drag and drop to create the font using that piece of software, that little plugin. And it spit itself out. And so the whole thing probably took me about an hour to do. It was really quick.
Thank you. That
You're
really
welcome.
helps.
You're welcome. Anything else? Oh, there's something in the chat. What are some of your biggest creative failures and what have you learned from them? Ooh, okay, good one, juicy. Let's see. I think, again, if we think about failure not as a destination, but as a stop along the way, I absolutely see some of my early podcast episodes as failures, but not in a way that I'm ashamed of them or embarrassed of them. I know that, like I said in my very first episode, I said, I hope this first episode is my worst episode, and I hope that I get better and stronger and kind of evolve as time goes on. And so I think if we're looking and redefining failure holistically, I think some of those early podcast episodes absolutely would be considered failures. But they're just pit stops along the way. So it's all good. Yeah. Any other questions? I want to know what your creative failures have been.
The big fat
Or
0 we got from a teacher.
I was going to say, or what you, even better. So there's Arthur C. Brooks. He's a thought leader. He's an author. And what he teaches a happiness class at Stanford or something like that, one of the big universities. But he has the students keep a failure journal. So what that means is something happens, doesn't go the way you planned it. You write it down. You revisit that line, that entry 1 week later, and you wrote down, okay, what did I learn from this, right? What did I learn from this failure? But then the magic comes when 3 months later, you revisit the same failure and what you learned from it, and you then write down, okay, what happened as a result? What's something positive that happened as a result of that failure? And so what he says in his class is that his students all of a sudden shift from like, oh gosh, a failure to, oh man, a failure. What possibilities is this going to open up for me? What's going to happen because I didn't make the team, or because I didn't get into the school, or because I got a C on this paper, right? So what has been made possible? What space is now there because a failure has happened? And I think that's such an interesting way, because thinking back to some of my failures, even in my teens and early 20s, like, I don't know, I wouldn't be the same person had those things not happened, right? Because new space and opportunities and different doors opened up as a result.
Do you have any questions? I was gonna ask, what was your happy accident? Like a really big, impactful, happy accident.
Ooh, okay, we're gonna have to go way back for this one. So this is like childhood trauma 101. So I had all of my friends were going to an art school. I'm a pretty artsy, fartsy kid. I was. All my friends going to this art school, but you have to audition to go to the art school. So, long story short, all my friends get in, all my friends, and I did not get into this art school. I have to go to the mainstream school. So, as a 14-year-old, this is devastating, devastating. But what that allowed me to do is it allowed me not only to explore my one kind of artistic passion or pastime, which in that case was dance, is what I auditioned for, didn't get in. And so what it allowed me to do was still dance in a studio as a teenager, but I could also take drama classes at school. I could also pursue instrumental music. I could also do all my artsy fartsy things that I would not have been able to touch had I not gone to that, had I gone to the other school. So it opened up a world of possibilities, which it sounds maybe dramatic, but it has shaped the way I move through life and have moved through life and my post-secondary and my career and all of these things have a direct connection and a direct line from getting that rejection letter. And so I think that was probably my most formative failure. Yeah.
That was really sweet. Oh, thank you. And that was really pretty interesting. So Rachel was asking, what did you write at your 1 week point for
Ooh, for
your
which?
the
I was taking notes on the failure journal
there's-
logs. I just missed what you said for the 1 week.
Okay. Yes. So at the 1 week, it's what did you learn, or like what's the big takeaway, right? So it's the failure. You give it some time. You wait a week. What did you learn? And then you give it a couple of months. Come back to it, and what opened up as a result of having failed. Mia, did you have something else? Do you have a question?
I did have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I feel like it doesn't really matter when you fail, but would you say it's better to fail a lot when you're, say, a student like us, or would you say it's better to it's either better or less or not better to fail when you're at your most best in your career after school?
I think the magic of school and the school environment. I mean, this is a whole separate talk your ear off about this, but uh, is good grades only, like having good grades, having the top marks, is kind of the biggest lie that we've sold students. That's the only thing that matters. Your involvement, your participation, your enthusiasm, your interest, your curiosity, your showing up, all of those things, being here in this meeting at 8:46 at night, this counts, right? All of this stuff matters. Grades, sure, are a piece, but they are not the only piece. And so I think the magic and the beauty of school and a school environment is there's room to fail, or there should be room to fail. There should be room to try and do some weird stuff and iterate and not get it right the first time, because that's should be the definition of school. So in terms of when it makes sense to fail, I mean, I, as a professional, and have been working now for, goodness, 17 years, doing things in this industry and in education, I am constantly failing. Like really and truly. Like I'll try something in class in front of 100 people and it's like crickets. I'm like, okay, note to self, right? And you just kind of pick yourself up, and it gets okay. I guess what I'm trying to say is it gets easier to fail as you get older. It gets easier to fail as you have a bit of that experience behind you. It gets easier to fail when you've tried 73 options and not just three options. So I think failure and experimentation and curiosity and moving through and creative life, being open to failure is important at all stages, but it does get easier.
That's such a neat perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Natalie?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been so inspiring hearing you speak about failure, and I feel like failure is such like a taboo word. Like no one, no one touches it with a 10-foot pole, and then to hear you kind of like bringing it out into the forefront, it's kind of a swab of like the kind of like cultural moment that we're in, where like we have to be productive and we have to do everything right, and it has to be in on time and perfect and all of that, right? So. I don't know, like your conversation and the workbook I was also looking through as you were talking. I don't know, it's like a multi-sensory view of or experience of failure, which I thought was really interesting because me looking back at like my early undergrad years, I'm graduating from my master's now. Um, I don't know, I feel like even just the idea of like a design critique or being in that critique space and having your work critiqued, there wasn't really a separation between myself and my work. And to have like people kind of like come in and talk about your work was like extremely hard. And that's when that multisensory kind of idea of failure was encapsulated. And then kind of you, like you said, as you go on, it becomes easier to quote unquote fail. And then you start taking it as kind of like, oh, this is fun. What kind of possibility comes from out of here? And then you look at things like class critiques as like a conversation where someone makes a comment and you're like, oh, right. So like, what if I were to do this? And like, you take it as an opportunity. So like, I really loved like how you're framing it and with the workbook. I'm gonna spend some time going through it as well. But anyway, with that whole prelogue, what I wanted to ask was, do you see there's like a difference between reflecting on failure for designers and then being in the design process and like reflecting on it while you're in it? So it's like, oh,
Mm.
okay, I made this type or I made this change in the layout and oh, it's not working. Okay, now what do I do? Do you feel like there's a difference between like the reflection after and then the reflection during? I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. I think it does make sense. So I'm gonna answer that question from the perspective of writing. So not exactly kind of design creative, but the best advice I think that authors can be given is to just write. So in your case, just design, right? Just put something down on the page, uh, and revise and edit, kind of get feedback later. I feel like it has to happen in stages, or else you're just going to be overwhelmed and stunting your own kind of exploration. So I think it really does have to be in two stages of just kind of like making, figuring it out, playing, exploring, and have some time, come back to it. That's when you can really take your own feedback, others' feedback, the audience's feedback, professional feedback. All of those things absolutely are important and factor into it. But I think there really are two separate parts of the process.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and as you were talking about critique, I hate that word. I know it's like the word to use, I know, but I feel like it gets confused with what we're actually doing. So I critiques are not about critiquing the individual, not even about critiquing the work, but it's about, does this work solve the problem, right? Is this a design solution that actually addresses the problem, the creative brief, the statement? And so from that perspective, critiques are actually should be quite objective. Like, here is the problem, here is the solution, one of 1,000 different solutions anyone could have come up with. Does it actually meet the needs of the problem? Does it solve the problem? And if it does, wonderful. Can there always be tweaks? Yes. But I think critiques are not, sometimes not explained the way they need to be in order to separate that work and worth, in order to kind of decouple our identity from the work itself, which is hard because as creatives, of course, we're intertwined and it's our baby, it's right. But I think it's so helpful to really come back to that place of objectivity and, does it solve the problem? Can we separate it from ourselves, and coming at it from a much more objective lens?
Thank you. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
if there's any other questions, Diana has her Instagram and her website linked, and that will also be in the minutes. So feel free. I don't want to speak for you, but feel free to reach out. And yeah, so let's all give a big
Happy
round
to
of
hear.
applause to Diana. And thank you so much for coming today and sharing your work and talking with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank, thank you, and absolutely feel free to reach out. Keep drawing with your feet. I posted my little Instagram link there, but yeah,
Perfect.
share anything you come across, and I'd love to connect.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great
Thank you,
evening.
everyone. You too.